As we get ready for picks and bans for Game 2, is there any universe where he gets Ao Kuang?
I still think that he might get Ao Kuang, honestly. There's just too many things that you got to ban away. Even though Arthur wasn't the main focus of that game, I still think that it has to be a priority pick or a ban specifically. But knowing Simplicity, the fact that they were able to experiment with a double Hunter composition, I wouldn't be surprised if Ao Kuang goes through. They just need to make sure that they're the ones controlling the pacing of that early game.
And outside of that laning phase, I think maniaK played pretty well on that Chang'e, had a lot of really impactful ultimates during team fights, which is why you're picking Chang'e, right? You're not picking Chang'e to win your laning phase. You're doing it to make an impact in those later game team fights. And he did that. It was just that Johnny's playing a late game hyper carry, and it's very difficult to out heal something like the DPS of an Ao Kuang. So maybe we see maniaK go for something a little more lane focused. We don't have to wait very long as picks and bans are now ready for game number 2. What are the gods that you really cannot afford to give up? If you're saying that there's a lot of gods you need to ban outside of Ao Kuang, what are some of those that you really want to keep out of Flashpoint's hands?
Well, apparently it's the Sylvanus and the AMC because that's what Simplicity is known for, right? So Flashpoint is going to take that away. But on the flip side, Simplicity took away the Freya and the Giannis in that game number 1. So I'm expecting a similar style. But seeing how Johnny performed in that first game, they're going to actually take that one away.
Very appropriate first ban, I would say, by Simplicity. Giannis, their second ban, really focusing on some of these magical damage dealers. But yes, this is what really should be happening. And here's my thought process. I agree with you that Ao Kuang is not the best god in the game that needs to be banned every game. But until Flashpoint proved to me that they can beat a really good team without the use of Ao Kuang, I'm banning it every game. You beat me with something else.
That's true. It makes a lot of sense. And Johnny got off to a great start, like 4-0 at the 25-minute mark. He was a part of 100% of his team skills until that Fire Giant buff came around, and he's got to be respected at this point, finally receiving that ban.
Sylvanus going to be first picked up by Flashpoint, really trying to keep it out of the hands of Genetics, where the StreakUp already got a Xbalanque. Like I mentioned, he played on very well on this in Game 1, so I don't mind them first picking it early Game 2, but is it really wise to give up King Arthur again? Because I feel like maniaK, he did good work with it in Game 1 or Game 2 of Week 1 last week. I think they could have gone for it here.
Possibly could have went for it, but now it's going to be on the side of Sibi. I think that he's going to be playing a very aggressive here yet again. I'm expecting this time for the Vamana to be in that solo lane. I don't think there's going to be a world where maniaK is going to play 2 mages 2 games in a row.
Could be the Cerberus still. He still is one of those few players that seems to be willing to go some of the more, at least aggressive Guardians. So I think that door is still open. And as I mentioned, Faeles had a pretty solid game in Game 1, despite Johnny getting off to such a big lead. So maybe they will want to keep that in the jungle as Jing again in that duo lane for Kespainify. That's a pick that he's been going to for years at this point. He's very comfortable with this god.
Knowing that they already have Sylvanus, you got to look for some Guardian bans. Against the Vamana, you would normally be the one picking the Khepri, but this time around, you have a better idea by getting the lane control with the Sylvanus. Great teamfight control as well with the Wrath of Terror.
Chang'e as well, so maniaK won't get the run back on that one. And I love Simplicity's strategy here. Ban out Bakasura, that's another pick for Johnny. This should be a Kali ban in my mind, another pick that he played, and that's exactly what it's going to be. Force Johnny to play something else. Prove to me that you can beat us with something else.
I would expect maybe a Pele pick. A lot of mobility on that side.
Would be good.
Similar to the Bakasura and the Kali, just extra mobility. And the way FaraKrik played the Thoth in that first game, I think that he was the reason they won. If not for FaraKrik stealing that Fire Giant buff, it might have went Simplicity's way.
Very true. So now Simplicity going to round out their draft. Another Fafnir. And Genetics played fine on this pick. It didn't seem to really impress me, but it didn't do poorly, so I'm fine with him going back to it. And now we're waiting on jungle or solo. And Ratatoskr can be either one of those things.
That's true.
If you're in maniaK shoes, which of these gods do you want up against King Arthur?
Probably Vamana, because you want to transition better in that mid to late game, and you want to put the global pressure, more importantly, in that jungle role in case your duo falls behind early.
I think I agree with you. I think Vamana would have a slightly better matchup. Ratatoskr kind of wants to box you a little bit in the early game, and you're not outboxing King Arthur at this point. Susano, the pick for Johnny. Do you think that's enough to win Flashpoint 2-0?
Yes.
We'll have to wait and see. Flashpoint looking for their 2-0 sweep up against Simplicity. Game 2 coming at you right now.
Well, maybe the sweep will be a little bit more tricky this time round now that they actually did ban the Ao Kuang taco. Are you surprised by that at all?
Not in the slightest. And Johnny, as a result, has defaulted to his secondary pick, which is... I feel like Susano is another pick that we see Johnny on a lot whenever he's not able to get the AO, but either way, I think Simplicity are already starting things off in a better step not having to worry about Dzoni on the AO.
But they do like this composition of the Fafnir Xbalanque quite clearly. Genetics likes this Fafnir pick. Up against Fusify and Kespainify, using the double root combination, I'd say. Just a root knock-up is available to them, keeping the pressure going. But Fusify focus on Genetics a lot means that wave clear is going to be a little bit one-sided for now. Blocks the hammer, however, so kind of even things up for the time being. Mid lane, it's Agni versus Thoth. No real surprise to see FaraKrik go bad to that. But I do like seeing the Agni on to DeathPanter here.
I think one of the reasons why Genetics has a tendency to look for this Fafnir is because he likes having the ability to cancel being the focus of the front line. We've seen that a decent amount, I think, at higher levels of play where teams will look to kill the front line before worrying about the squishies, and Fafnir can be one of the more difficult frontliners to handle.
A lot of pressure coming out here. The Xbalanque bowler causing so much extra damage, even if it hits the minions, just splitting off. And Splinter is the dash in from DeathPanter, very aggressive. Dzoni goes in too, looks for the kill on Faeles, but the minions are there to cause some problems. Forcing back, he needed one more basic, but I think the archers would have killed him in response.
Either the archers or DeathPanter maybe could have had the cooldown for the Flame Wave. I think he used the Flame Wave at the end there, but it only hit FaraKrik. But had Dzoni stayed pushed up, that would have definitely connected.
Sibi once again on the King Arthur up against maniaK's Vamana this time round. maniaKK bringing out all the Season 1 gods he used to play for the most part. Was a lot of healers, and then now and again the old big baby did come into the fray. But DeathPanter in the mid looks like he's going for the Bankosh Talon this game, something that we see a lot on the Agni players. I say a lot, but then again, you know, certain players like to go the Kronos Pendant Rush, which we've seen a little bit more of.
It's just easy damage, though, for Agni, and the sustain is also nice to have off of the bombs, and even the Flame Wave still deals a decent bit of damage. Bancroft is just an all-around solid item for a large portion of the current meta favorites for mages. I
think the second week of EU SML has really showed how close the competition's going to be this year in the minor league, at least over in Europe specifically, because there's every single game just feels like it could go either way. There's plenty of high skill from all these players, and you can almost see most of them getting into the SPL at some point. If not, they've already been there in their career.
Well, it's also just crazy to think, because we're looking for the top 2 out of the European SML, but all of these teams feel like they could possibly be a top 2 team.
Yeah. I think any given week it could be a different story. And I think that's the fun thing about how this year is going to play out in the minor league, is seeing who actually comes up to the top of the standings consistently. Fusify looking for a pull there. StreakUp just with a nice little left side dodge to safety. More than likely Transcendence versus Devourer's Gauntlets by the look of it as it stands. StreakUp forced to dash away after throwing out the poison there. Right hand side though, Dzoni and Faeles will meet momentarily, say hello to each other, and continue on their merry way to mid.
One thing StreakUp does need to be careful with, though, off that Rising Jaguar is not getting hit by the persistent gust afterwards, because Kespainify, if he decides to hold that cooldown on Jing until the later portions of the Jaguar dash, when StreakUp looks to close the gap, he might actually end up knocking himself up, and that could be a turnaround opportunity for Flashpoint.
Listen, real Sylvanus players pull Xbalanques out of the Rising Jaguar. That's what it's about.
The timing on that would just be so obscene. Like, it's just unreal time. That's more luck-based timing than anything else.
Skill, Taco. You just don't understand.
Nah.
You hunters think you got all the mechanics in the world.
The delay on the fire for Fusify's pull in comparison to Rising Jaguar hitting that CC immunity streak, it's just...
It's easy. It's easy. I guarantee you. It'll happen this game. Watch it happen now.
Fusify needs
Predict
like
the future.
9,000 IQ for that one.
Let's see if he can find that, though. They've already got 1-0 Flashpoint after game 1. It was an endeavor that was relatively even for a long period of time between the two, with both junglers with the majority of kills, up until a mistaken fire giant call that kind of cost simplicity of the game. They were down anyway, but it definitely ended the game a lot quicker for Flashpoint.
And I might be saying this a little bit preemptively, but it already starts to feel like North American SML meta in comparison to that of Europe. Europe is just a little bit slower paced at the start. I think that a lot of the European competition just prefers basing things around 1 or 2 team fights, because that's usually, when you're waiting 20 minutes to start an engagement, you're going to, like, the match is going to be heavily impacted by that one team fight. And I think we've seen a lot of more of that in Europe than what we have in North America. And
that's always been the case.
If that continues, I'm really curious to see what the matchups are like.
It's definitely something in the water, though, because Europe's always been that side that will go a little bit longer, a little bit more tactical focused over brutal bloodshed and aggression, which is what you see more out in North America. Maybe it's in the genes, you know? Could be something like that. We'll find out if that continues through the season. But yeah, at the moment, Europe's been a little bit slower. We get to watch some Man League North America later on today and see how their meta is continuing to develop over there. And of course, next week, the Pro League will begin. We'll get our first SPL action and get to see how the Pro meta is going to develop, which will probably have a knock-on effect to the Minor League and the Console League if they are currently different.
That trickle-down effect,
Always
as
happens.
we like to call it. It
That's
always
when rank
takes
changes
place.
too, right? That's when every game changes. of
Europe's
conquest.
not ready for NA ranked. I'm just going to say that right now. The awesome JQs are going to tear them apart.
We'll see what he can do. Root off the mark from Fusify. It just means he will land that pull on XBalanque now. I can just feel it coming. I'm going to predict it.
Something else, though, that I really like about Simplicity's draft this game is that they have range to match that from the Thoth. The DeathPanter with these bombs can actually even cause a little bit of area denial that might be more favorable in some of these jungle fight engagements in comparison to the Thoth, because if all the focus is onto DeathPanter and trying to prevent this Agni from casting bombs, that's going to give Faeles all the time in the world, I think, on the Ratatoskr to pose a constant threat to the backline, and it's going to split the attention from Flashpoint, and I think Sylvanus might struggle a little bit more than what a Kepri did, for example.
Right, Harpy's being contested. Dzoni gets put into an awkward spot there, but will get away. 2 ultimates used by Flashpoint on the defense, but Fusify's in a lot of trouble. Gets back to the tier 1 tower range, but the rat's in the sky, and on landing, he'll easily chop down the tree. Next up is going to be Dzoni on the Susano, where Faeles gets himself a double kill. Sibi wrapping around on the King Arthur, stunned in place. Nice little work there from DeathPanter, but the follow-up, Sibi's just being juggled around, and the CC is how you deal with King Arthur. He ults onto Genetics, who's still standing tall for now. Finally, the damage is good enough to bring him down, but it's going to cost him potentially 4 kills. One more basic could do it. Nope. Boomerang is good enough. maniaKK gets himself a double. Faeles gets himself a double. Simplicity off to a great start.
That's the collapse that Simplicity wanted to have in Game 1 but couldn't find because of how limiting their composition was. But as soon as Flashpoint was put on the retreat, it was just a one-by-one dominoes effect. Simplicity understood. Fusify, very low on mana, already down to 20% health. That's a freebie for Faeles to pick up out of the Through the Cosmos alone. I love what maniaKK did, though. While he was in that Vamana ultimate, tanking up the tower first and foremost, because he would have the most time to be able to absorb all of those T1 shots, so Faeles able to start aggressing onto Dzoni shortly after. It was just a really well-played team fight from Simplicity.
When you look at the map, there's nothing extra really been taken from Simplicity outside of that fight. And the lead that's developed now, he's approaching about 1.5k just after that one fight. Obviously, it gives a nice little lead to Faeles and maniaKK in their respective lanes as well. So now they're going to have a little bit closer towards that next item.
But mid lane should be the focus here for Simplicity, because trying to gank a Jing Wei, I think we all have seen that a million times before. Jing Wei is she's just going to dash away and then use airstrike, and then she's gone.
Yep.
But Thoth, you get that dash,
And then
that's about it. You've got to either put damage or die, and FaraKrik just could only do so much with the time limits that he was given underneath his T1 tower. And sure, Simplicity didn't really get that much damage into the structure itself, but now they have timer on speed buff. Now they can look for these future invades like Faeles and Genetics are already grouping for.
Dzoni and FaraKrik were all there. They recognize what's going on, but I don't think they can stop it with just 3 members. Fusify on the way over as FaraKrik trying to get some damage over the wall. The speed buff's been attacked, but Kespainify comes in very quickly here with the rotation from the dual lane using Jing Wei. Bombs on Fusify and a knockup will dissuade Flashpoint from continuing the chase. And just for good measure, StreakUp will use the Darkest of Nights to prevent them aggressing any further. But there's still 3 strong in mid. And I think they found Sibi in the jungle alone now, because everybody from Flashpoint just headed towards the mid lane. And Panther's there to cut them off.
I like where DeathPanter was positioned. Also, hold that thought, though. Typhoon coming in from Dzoni, going to deal some decent damage, but the knockup won't be applied until Fusify's ultimate. FaraKrik from over the wall with the final judgment. Of course, it doesn't go unanswered, though. maniaKK in the big baby form, going to bring down the tree.
Yeah, Fusify committed to getting the kill onto DeathPanter there. He did the alley-oop for FaraKrik to find the damage over the wall, but it cost him his life in response. End of the day, there was support for a mid laner. Definitely in favor of Flashpoint there, I would say, even though the kill difference will say otherwise as it stands at the moment. I'm a little bit worried about the group-ins from Flashpoint. You saw it in the very first engagement. They got themselves caught on the corner in a choke point, and then the decisions after the fact there in that last fight cost him a little bit more.
Well, I actually liked where DeathPanter was positioned at first until until Flashpoint decided to just counter collapse, but DeathPanter was there to zone
away, yeah.
the other members from from Flashpoint that had already gone into the mid lane, because he had time to provide a bomb stun just in case Simplicity wanted to commit to Sibi. But it's a King Arthur, so Flashpoint think better of it, but by then, Flashpoint have already realized at the same time that, hey, this Agni is alone, and we can definitely drop everything in to kill him.
Well, the builds at the moment, FaraKrik has the Book of Thoth online and got the Shoes of Focus to go with it. DeathPanter gone for the penetration option and the Bancrofts as well. So I'm expecting penetration out of both these characters next on the cards, potentially. We'll see what they develop into. The Pyromancer has spawned, so now there's a little bit more of a neutral objective on the right-hand side of the map to be looking at, not just the Tomek.
I think this is interesting, though, from Fusify. Look at these builds transpiring from the supports already. Genetics a little bit more team-based, and Fusify's feeling kind of selfish for a Sylvanus.
Well, it depends where this goes. It could be a Lotus Crown, right? Still, and like Lotus Crown can be useful. Well, Fusify may need some more protections right about now. He's not going to have them in time to stay alive. Genetics gets credit for the kill there, using the Dragon Form to his ability. But that's the issue with going for this sort of build, Taco. You're not as tanky as you think you are. You need a bit of health.
He looked like paper. They chopped him down in no time.
And that's the trade-off with going for the Lotus Crown at this point. You'll get some protection, sure, but you won't have any natural health in the pool. He's relying on the heals because those protections from Lotus Crown make a big difference.
I almost feel like he was better off going for protections no matter what in this circumstance, though, because Agni, even if he does get that Lotus Crown online, if DeathPanter wants to buy Divine Ruin, Agni is probably one of the best mages to apply anti-heal on. So
Definitely.
all in all, the Lotus Crown feeling a little bit more like wasted gold than anything else.
It'll help out his team more with the aura, I'd say, more than anything else. But the fact is, the other builds that we'll see a little bit of magical defense. Sometimes a Genji's or an Oni's Hunter earlier on. And when you see those rushed, you do get some health out of that too.
I think I just would have preferred to see the survivability option for Fusify over the team sustain route, because he's already struggled by being made the focus point from Simplicity. I think it's just easy for Simplicity to collapse the Sylvanus. They have really good area spread damage, and they also have Faeles on the Ratatoskr, so the knockup is practically guaranteed.
Wait from Faeles, catches Kespainify, gets the airstrike out in response. Kespainify was patient enough to save his beads there, however, but the airstrike not being available could be a window for Simplicity to start looking around this Gold Fury. Nice bit of ward coverage, however, from Fusify. You can see that ward there, that little radar dish, making sure that if they do pull it, they're going to have a nice angle on what's going on, and the Sentry Ward doesn't spot it. That's one of the benefits of those angles there.
Johnny gonna get spotted out by Genetics. Nice hammer stun to cut him off. Wind Siphon also not gonna connect here. Darkest Night has been applied. Rising Jaguar going straight forward, but it's through the Cosmos that Kespainify has to keep an eye out for.
The Cosmos was spotted just in time, though. Kespainify off the knockup just dashes away. But this pressure is going to force Johnny and Kespainify back to base. Simplicity start to rotate towards the Gold Fury once more. Faeles, meanwhile, busy with Fusify. Didn't respect FaraKrik, but FaraKrik dashed in looking for the stun kill. Instead, he wastes his beads and ends up dying too. Sibi can only watch on as the tree's forced back to the tier 2. Kespainify and Sibi, the only two around to try and stop this for now.
Sibi tried to find the killing blow onto Faeles, but by then the shell had already been applied. Simplicity just constantly juggling around Flashpoint's attention. That was just tunnel vision, though, from FaraKrik the whole way through. You have to expect that Simplicity is still lurking that Gold Fury corner, so for him to dash in so aggressively just felt really out of character for FaraKrik.
Yeah, I felt to myself that he was going for the play to kill him and get out as quick as possible, but as soon as he dashed in and saw the situation he was in, it was like, oh no, this was a bad mistake, and his life was pretty much over at that point. Like the idea of the beads, though. Make sure he doesn't get CC'd so he can try and thread the needle with the shot, do a yamming, so to speak, but didn't find the window. So in the end, Simplicity are now up 7-2. The Gold Fury wasn't taken there, surprisingly enough. Simplicity just happy to keep baiting Flashpoint into these fights around the Gold Fury.
And that Gold Fury not being pulled, by the way, I think because of the fact that Sibi had already made the rotation over. maniaKK was not available immediately, so Sibi beating him to the objective just made it unlikely for Simplicity to want to pull that Gold Fury immediately, even after having the pick. And now that FaraKrik is back up in respawn, I think that Simplicity would much rather take their time and be patient with looking for another opportunity, another pick opportunity, most likely into the objective.
Much better step up from Simplicity this game so far. When you look at the kills, you can also look at the assists in this game. maniaKK involved in every single one of the kills. Same can be said for DeathPanter. Shows the teams working as a unit, grouping together and actually playing through each other, which is important at this level of play, especially when you're down 1-0 of what happened in game 1.
And all of the picks have just been so one-sided also for Simplicity. Sure, Flashpoint's had a couple of responses, but for the most part, Simplicity has already gotten a kill and some.
Ooh, get the final judgment out of FaraKrik there. Nice little reset. The ward coverage clearly gave him away. Or it was just a noise being heard in time. Sibi and maniaKK now in the mid lane. 3 members grouped up as in jumps Jing, finds the hammer onto Fusify. Back in the fight, maniaKK keeping Sibi and Dzoni busy, but Fusify is almost out of life again. No shocker there. He's now dead. Kespainify, meanwhile, being pressured out by Faeles, who does a good job of buying a bit of time, does Kespainify. And staying alive. Hasn't used his airstrike yet. Simplicity back to the Gold Fury.
But they just want Sibi instead. If they can bring down this King Arthur, there's no one left to try and play frontline for this Gold Fury attempt. Dzoni gonna toss out the Typhoon, but it doesn't find a home. At least no one left to kill, because all of Simplicity are just topped up. Flashpoint has already lost their frontline, and I think this is where the Sylvanus becomes more of a trap card for Flashpoint than anything else. Fusify is just a walking bullseye for the members of Simplicity, and he is struggling to find safe, maneuverable paths.
And the reason is because the massive AoE that Simplicity has, for the most part, it's hitting him multiple times. I mean, StreakUp's ultimate is going to make an effect anyway. Faeles may catch him. Definitely Agni bombs consistently. And if maniaKK just sees a tree standing there, he's like, well, go on, I'll give it a bit of a beating for a while if I can. Especially when he builds a little bit on the lower end. maniaKK using the Thorns to keep the beat down on Dzoni. Is forcing a teleport out of Sibi here as Johnny's just trying to survive and get farm. maniaKK's having none of that. He's clearly not happy about how game 1 went. Looking to stamp his authority down in game 2.
Every single cooldown already expended between the Stormkata and the Jetstream. If you haven't created enough distance by then to get away from the Vamana, Dzoni... He ran around the tower, but there's really just nowhere left for him to go. And that Hasten Katana doesn't help.
Well, now the Pyromancer started up here by Simplicity, looking to keep this snowball going. Sibi's the only one really around, but what can King Arthur do against it? He'll get knocked up, he'll force a reset, he'll get engaged on, he'll lose half his life, he'll spin to win. The bomb rains down, over the corner comes the rat. Nice knock up from Fusify. Sibi's actually going to escape this, but Fusify may be a different story.
DeathPanter actually taking the full extent of that final judgment damage, but the bomb over the top right onto Fusify's noggin. It's not the first time we've seen him be burned to the ground.
You know what I hate about playing support, Taco, is sometimes you can make mistakes yourself, like, for example, buying the Lotus Crown here, right? But then there'll be situations where you're like, well, I've still got to play support and help out my team. So Sibi gets himself in a load of trouble. Fusify gets him out, but loses his life in the process, so his scoreline looks even worse than it deserves to be.
And I want to make it clear here, too. This isn't me trying to Oh, hold that thought, though. maniaKK going to go into the big baby form. Still trying to all-in commit onto Sibi, but it's anti-heal, I think. Actually, there is no anti-heal for maniaKK.
No, they've only got a Divine Ruin online, which has just been picked up by FaraKrik. Fails his rotation towards Dzoni. He's putting him in a bad spot. He has to jet stream back to safety. Pulls Faeles under the tower, but that takes his own life. He will get a turnaround kill onto Sibi. By Sibi, I should say, but then maniaKK picks him up too. 2-for-1 exchange going in favor of Simplicity.
Two things. First, Dzoni should have a Brawler's Beat Stick, not a Jotun's, in that third item slot. When you're against the team comp involving a Vamana, there's just, you need to rush the anti-heal.
Or at least, we should at least have an Ankh is what I'm worried about here. If you don't going to go for the anti-heal, at least go Ankh so you can at least burst him, right? That's
one or the other.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I like the aggression there from Flashpoint. I think that was the right call, but they spent too long trying to bring down the big baby. And again, if that had been a Brawler's instead of a Jotun's, maniaKK dies there.
Really?
I think he dies there because the anti-heal would have been enough, I think, to prevent him from actually profiting off of that big baby form. And maniaKK was just able to keep sustaining himself back up, and it was just too much. So Flashpoint had to take way too long for the commit, and by then it's an overcommit for a solo laner, and the rotations from Simplicity, they had more than enough time.
That was point 1.
That was point 1.
What was point
Yeah.
2? You said there was 2 points.
Well,
I'm waiting
the
for the
initial
second one
point
now.
was something that we had been...
Oh, the Lotus Crown?
On the Lotus
Yeah,
Crown, yeah. Where I was trying to make it clear that, like, we've been talking about Fusify a lot as, like, you know, oh, Fusify's dead again.
Sure.
But the reality of the situation is it's just that easy for Simplicity to locate him
Yeah.
and kill him. This isn't really a fault of Fusify's, I think, as
No,
far as
exactly.
positioning errors are concerned.
And that's why I was talking about, you know, he's made a mistake, in my opinion, in terms of the build with the Lotus Crown early, but he's also having to sack himself sometimes for the good of the team
Without
to
a
keep
doubt.
his carries alive. And it's always an awkward spot when you end up there, and it makes your scoreline look even worse than it is. But Fusify is a damn good support player, and we'll see what he can do in the rest of this game now. But at the moment, it's causing problems. The 10 kills down, gets a pull on maniaKK. maniaKK doesn't really worry, though. He's charging him for FaraKrik, whose Aegis is now down. Into the backline goes maniaKK. The big baby has been popped, and the beatdown begins. Meanwhile, all this distraction is meaning Johnny's left wide open, and Faeles is hunting him down. Kespainify late on the rotation with this Jing Wei. He's going to turn up to the fight a little bit too late to stop anything. Johnny's doing his best job of bravely running away. Finally, Kespainify turns up to support, so Johnny will survive. But meanwhile, the tier 1 tower's gone down, and sadly so has Fusify.
All Faeles is doing, though, is just wasting the time of Flashpoint's carries. Kespainify and Johnny, they're two of the biggest damage dealers on Flashpoint, and they've both been distracted by this Ratatoskr. T2 tower is going to fall as a result because the other 4 members of Simplicity were just pushing. They held W in the mid lane. They killed Fusify yet again. I'm almost starting to feel bad for Fusify at this point.
But I will say, this is Simplicity doing a very good job of putting their foot on the throat of this game and saying, no, Flashpoint, you won't get back into this. Like, whatever you try and do, we're going to answer back and we're going to slam this home even more. They just get a tier 1 and a tier 2 in the mid lane. The Fury's back up again. This time it'll be a primal one. And I think this is Flashpoint looking at a desperation play to try and get themselves back in. They do have FaraKrik for this, though. Can he make it work?
Not if Sibi's already dead. Sibi's still on the run, but this big baby is just all over the place. maniaKK almost catching up to Kespainify there. Auto attack going to be off the mark for a moment. But Kespainify still on the run. Everybody has been zoned away. And it all comes back to that last play by Faeles. I think Faeles did a perfect job of directing the attention of 2 carries from Flashpoint onto himself. Final Judgment not going to connect. Same case for the Typhoon.
That reset was so good from Simplicity. Now they'll get themselves the Fury. Not only that, Faeles to pick up FaraKrik, who had no beads or Aegis, trying to hang around and help. And now Johnny is on a ward there, doesn't know it. He will now as he tries to get some damage out, falls down to StreakUp. Both the carries of Simplicity combining, and that's a 10k gold lead now.
And this game is probably the best example I could think of for how big of a difference a giraffe can make. Because Simplicity had no intro to get into the backline last game versus Flashpoint, and they suffered horribly because of it. Everyone was just dying. And here, Simplicity, they have clear advantages, and they are taking every single one of them. They're stripping the map of any farm and experience, further crippling Flashpoint's carries from being able to buy items or get the experience necessary to contest any of these big objectives. And the zoning. I think that this draft is just so excellent at its control across the map in every aspect that Flashpoint just doesn't really know where to approach Simplicity from.
Control is definitely the biggest point of this game, I'd say, at the moment, and that's exactly what they've been doing to shut down King Arthur as well, who has been prominent and spoken about a lot in terms of his power and controlling games. His difficulty to be killed, but if you've got enough CC, it can shut him down, and it's doing so far. Fire Giant goes down for Simplicity. They get a tier 2, keep marching on towards a Phoenix, while Faeles in the jungle is dancing with Kespainify and Fusify, making sure they can't get back to help on the defense.
And this is all that Faeles has to continue doing. Right side Phoenix going to fall without much of a fight at all. And Faeles could possibly even kill Fusify, or someone from Flashpoint could help Faeles cut off Fusify. Either way, I'm not too sure this tree is going to survive any longer. Same could be said for everybody on the right-hand side. Is DeathPanter going to collect Johnny first of all?
I think we're going back to the drawing board here. This is looking pretty much like we're going to get a game 3 relatively soon. Faeles does. He finally get the kill on Fusify, and that's no real surprise. The surrender vote's coming out.
Game 3 indeed between these two teams. Faeles just harassing Kespainify from inside of the fountain. Not a full deicide, but 21-3 says about everything that we could possibly say about how controlling Simplicity was in this game.
That happens to a lot of teams. It's not a surprise. Sometimes it just doesn't go your way and the beatdown continues. These players will find a small little bit of an advantage and make it as wide open as they can do. It's happened at Worlds. It's happened everywhere. It's no real surprise, but they still have a game 3. Going into this one, what are your changes you'd like to see?
One thing to note is that Simplicity does have a lot of the momentum right now, I think, after winning Game 2, but things have pretty much been a hard restart. I think it's time to shift away from the Thoth. I think that DeathPanter and Simplicity have found the appropriate responses. I also want to see Fusify on a Guardian that he can be a little bit more mobile with.
What about King Arthur? Have you seen Sibi do anything really? I've not really felt the King Arthur impact there.
I didn't feel the King Arthur impact,
Is
but
that
King
because of
Arthur,
comps?
he's not really a solo laner that is going to drastically change the outcome of a game, I think. At least not at a competitive level when everybody from the enemy team is that far ahead. That just felt like King Arthur couldn't... I don't think any solo laner would have made much of a difference there.
Well, we'll find out what happens in Game 3, but first of all, it's Aggro and Tully on the desk.
Thank you very much, Graham and Taco. Game 2 goes Simplicity's way, and they make it look pretty easy, Tully. 24 minutes, and it's on the back of maniaKK and DeathPanter. I mean, this Vamana pick again,
Yes.
this is kind of the trend of the day, isn't it? That Vamana in the solo lane is just crushing people.
It has been. Also, Faeles on the Ratatoskr had a good performance. I think a lot of it came down to really abusing Fusify playing the Sylvanus. They were so worried about genetics getting that pick that they drafted it very early in the draft. I think he went something like 0-6, putting himself in positions where he had to be there to save the rest of his teammates, but he himself couldn't get out of.
It's one of those catch-22s. It's do we take this pick and for ourselves and maybe it won't work super well for our comp, maybe our support isn't super comfortable with it, or do we just let genetics get one of his signature picks? And I think that after that performance, Game 3, I think they might be a little bit more likely to just let genetics have it and test their luck that way.
And that desperation goal Fury at 21 minutes, and they were already behind 8,000 gold.
Right.
It just wasn't going to work out for them against a level 20 Vamana.
Yeah, that's the right sort of call, I'd think. At that point, the game is almost basically over anyways.
Sure.
May as well try and make a low-risk or high-risk, low-even reward play. Did not work out for the boys of Flashpoint. So now as we move into Game 3, what are some of the changes that you think Simplicity and Flashpoint will both make just based on each other's wins?
The easiest one is don't draft Sylvanus for yourself. It didn't really seem that Fusify was having that great of a game. Not to say that he can't play Sylvanus or not to say that his build was bad. It was just the way Simplicity played around that pick. Isolating the Sylvanus is a very easy task to do. It's been around since the beginning of this god's inception of the strategy to take him out.
I also think that if I'm on Flashpoint, I'm just top 3ing one of Johnny's gods. I mean, he goes 0-5 this game on the Susano, doesn't make nearly the impact that he does in most of their games. I think that waiting until after the second ban phase, you're just giving Simplicity too many pans to take out your best player.
And also, they didn't really invest anti-healing to deal with maniaK's
That's true.
Vamana. They put the Divine Ruin on a Thoth, but you want him to have as much damage as possible. Normally, you would want to put Brawler's Beatstick on the jungle position. Instead,
Absolutely.
he opted for the Yonin's Raft there. That could have been cleaned up a little bit.